Welcome back to Gloved Up Garage. This is part 2 of the run and drive series on my cheap 89 Coupe. I did an introductory video that showed every bit of problems that this thing has that I could see on the outside. Part 2 of that, or really part 1 of the run and drive, was me getting the car running. So make sure to go back and check that out. That was pretty cool to get it to fire up for the first time after many years of sitting. And now I'm to the point where I want to get this back down on the ground and I want to drive it. While I had it up in the air starting, I put it in gear and I heard a lot of noise back here that I didn't like. And then I found something in the trunk when I was going through it when I first got the car that kind of gave me a clue I was going to have an issue with that. What I found was one of the material, like the pads to a brake shoe. These cars had rear disc brakes. So this is the material that I found that came off of that brake shoe right there. And that was in the trunk, so somebody had this apart, plus the lug nuts weren't tight when I took this wheel off. But I don't really know a lot about these systems. I've replaced these shoes maybe 1 or 2 times in the 20 plus years I've been working on Fox bodies, because we normally took all of this stuff off, including the axle, and swapped to 5 lug and put disc brakes on the back. So it's very rare that I actually did any kind of service work to these drums. And I know it's kind of a simple design, but it looks very complicated. You've got a couple of springs in here. There's a cable with some sort of adjuster. There's a couple of other springs that hold the pads onto the shoes onto the backing plate. And then there's another slack adjuster down at the bottom. I just haven't messed with drum brakes that much. I've always dealt with disc brakes. Just like I've always worked on EFI cars, and I haven't really worked on a lot of carbureted cars. So, call me a newer mechanic or whatever you want to say, but I haven't dealt with a lot of the older systems like drum brakes and carburetors. I'm used to EFI, and I'm used to disc brakes. So, it is what it is. So what I'm going to do, in order to work on this, I'm going to pull the wheel off the other side again because I pulled the right one first. And I will be able to see what this should look like without any kind of problems because the other side's good. So I'll look and see where all the hardware goes, where all these springs and stuff go as I put the new stuff on. So the weird thing about this, I had to go to 2 different stores in order to get the hardware kit and the shoes because nobody out here stocks this stuff anymore for these drum brakes. I mean, let's face it, this is an 89, so it's now 35 years old. There's just not a lot of parts on the shelf for 35-year-old vehicles. So there's a little complication there, just having to run around and get the right parts. But I'm going to work through it and get this knocked out. Once I get the brakes done on the back here, I'm going to go ahead and do both sides. Then I'm going to put the car down on the ground and actually get to drive it, hopefully. So this is the passenger side, and I'm using this as a reference video. But I'm going to go ahead and include the clip just so I can see where all these springs, the retainers, there's a spring under there that holds the pads together. And then that's where that cable goes. It looks like it stretches around that little, whatever that is. So yeah, all right. Now I know what it looks like, what it's supposed to look like. And I hose this down with brake cleaner to make it a little bit easier to see stuff too. Back over here to the driver's side, I went ahead and got everything apart. And I've officially hit my first snag. This is the slack adjuster that goes at the bottom. This is what kind of spaces out the pads or shoes. And when you put the drum back on, there's supposed to be a little bit of drag on that. And this is what adjusts it. But if you notice, I'm going to turn this. It's bent. And it's completely frozen. There's some threads in here that this will not allow me to zoom in. There you go. You can kind of see the threads between this piece and this piece. This thing is completely locked up. You can see these scratches and stuff. That's for me putting it in the vise, heating it up, and trying to get it to come loose, which it will not. It's completely frozen. That could be why that pad and the shoe came apart. Who knows? So they make a master hardware kit, which I assume has got a lot more than just a few springs and stuff that I got for $8. I'm going to have to order the master kit, and that sucks because it's a nice day. I really wanted to drive this thing, and I don't want to take this out with, you know, any of this stuff still in here. I could block off this particular drum or this wheel cylinder, you know, take it loose from the hard line and block it off and go out and drive the car, and it really wouldn't affect anything. I just wouldn't have drum brakes on this side. I'm too far into this to really do that. I'm just going to hose this down with brake cleaner and clean up some of these parts with a wire wheel that I know are going to be reused. Like maybe this little elbow here gets reused, and then I think this cable does. Maybe this arm that goes between the two shoes. It's kind of a bummer. I don't know if you could tell, but it's really kind of taking my mood down. I really wanted to get this thing put back together, but such is life. 35-year-old car, parts aren't available on the shelf anymore, and it is what it is. So I'm going to move on to something else. I still have plenty of work to do to this car. Whole interior needs to be vacuumed. These windows are really bothering me, how the window tint's on there. It just makes the car look kind of crappier than it is. So that's what I'm going to work on next. I'm going to get in here and clean the interior, take the seats out, clean these windows really good, get that old tint off, and vacuum out this nasty interior because, well, it's just a nasty mess in here. I still got to put all the trim back on the dash too from where I got the ignition switch replaced in that part 1 of run and start. It's just part of the process. It's a project car, and you know, this is what happens when you get a really cheap project car. You get to put a lot of elbow grease in to make it nice. So I'll get to work on that, and yeah, we'll come back when we get the parts to do the brakes. So I managed to jump on O'Reilly's website just to look one more time, and I found this master hardware kit not too far away from me, about half an hour. Jumped in the car, ran out there and got it. So this has absolutely everything from the pads out. I mean, other than the wheel cylinders, of course, but the adjuster that's locked up, well, I've got that. I've got all these little pieces in here, little brackets. It even comes with the plug, actually several different plugs. They go on the back of the backing plate so you can reach in there and adjust these. So I'm going to divide this stuff up, go ahead and grab the shoes and throw some gloves on and get back to work. So when I said that I've only done this 2 or 3 other times before this, I definitely wasn't lying. I just made a beginner's mistake. I had everything together. You can see all the new hardware there because I just took it back off. I put it all back together, and this thing was bound up on the drum like it would not turn. I thought maybe it's tight. I had it adjusted out. I broke the bleeder screw loose on the wheel cylinder, thinking maybe the wheel cylinder was expanded. That it was not. And then I broke the line loose and tried to compress the wheel cylinder. I've got it compressed all the way. I still had too much drag on the drum. And watching Viceskip Garage as much as I do, I really should have paid attention a little bit more when he's working on drum brakes, because I would have figured something out pretty quick. So I'm going to show you the shoes. Well, this is the shoe that I had on the front. You can see there's some wear on it. You know, I had it on there like that, like the way it goes. And some of you have probably already figured out what's going on, but this is the back shoe that I had on there. And let me put them side by side. Now, one would think you would want more material on the front of the drum instead of the rear of the drum. Well, that's not how drum brakes work. And this is one of those lessons that I had to learn. So the one with the most material, the one that I had on the front, actually goes on the rear. The one with the least amount of material goes on the front, which would explain why this thing didn't work. Now, to my credit, I guess you could say, they're not marked. There's nothing on here that says front, rear, anything. There's a part number there from AutoZone, but there's nothing, you know, no front, no rear, no nothing like that. So, beginner's mistake. Like I said, one of those things that if I would have paid a little bit more attention to some of the other YouTuber videos, I might have caught that. But, all right, so now I'm going to start all over and put all this back together again. Well, I jumped into the groove and just started getting everything put back together. Had some music going and just needed to concentrate on getting the brakes done on this wheel and then getting the wheel back on. So unfortunately, I didn't get much footage of me reassembling this stuff and putting that new wheel cylinder and all the brakes back together. It was a lot of frustration from having to do it several times. I just wanted to get it done. So now that the brakes are on, I've got the wheels bolted back on. We've got it up in the air. I'm going to get it down off the jack stands, and then I'm going to move on to the next thing on this car to get it ready to go onto the road. I need to get all this old tint off of these windows and really clean this thing up so that it can be driven around. It's really bad. All the tint's falling off. I've peeled a little bit of it off here and there, but I think a majority of this is going to come off really easy. So the key to getting old tint like this off is to use a cleaner that has the ammonia in it, because the ammonia will attack the adhesive on the tint. It won't hurt the glass, but it will release the adhesive from the glass. So I want to save this window. Obviously, I don't want to scrape off my lines for my defrost because I don't want to lose that stuff. So I'm going to spray this down with that, basically like an off brand of Windex that has ammonia in it. And then I'm going to let this soak, and I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to spray this several times throughout the day. It's supposed to be like 70 degrees today. And really the best way to do this is when you're soaking this down, you want to put like a garbage bag on the inside, and then you want to put that cleaner between the garbage bag and the tint, and it will get into like the creases and the lines, because usually these are not just one solid piece of tint. There's like two pieces that they butt up against each other, but it will get into that seam and it'll release the tint, and it'll allow that ammonia to get in there and attack the adhesive. In my case, I'm not going to need to do that because I've got peeling up here at the top. Of course, I've got one section that's not peeled, and then the rest of it that is. That stuff's going to soak in really quick, and it will get after all this and get it off of there. So I'm going to work on spraying that, and then I'm going to get back to work on the car because, again, I want to let this sit kind of all day while I do other things to the car before I worry about trying to get this tint cleaned off. Well, this took a completely different turn than what I wanted it to. As I was going to start cleaning the window tint off, I realized that the power windows and the power locks didn't work. No matter which one of these switches I pushed, I got no noise. Yeah, I went ahead and cleaned this window, but I need to get the edges of this window. If you see up there in that run channel where it's still got tint, and that's why I wanted to drop the window down so I could finish cleaning this window off. That's all the window tint that I peeled off. But anyways, so I started to trace fuses and wiring to try to figure out why the windows wouldn't work. I still don't know yet. I've still got to trace a little bit more. But so I pulled that kick panel over there on the driver's side over here, and I found a bunch of wiring back in here like this that's tied into those window switches and the locks. And the best thing I can figure is this had like a keyless entry on it that was tied into the alarm system. Somebody spent a lot of money on that setup back in the day, because Alpine is not cheap stuff, and it was tied into everything. And I also found some wiring that ran over here to the radio, so I went ahead and started pulling it out. If you remember from the first video, it had a Pioneer radio inside of it. Well, I'm sorry, but I had to pull the console and everything out to get it out. I've gone ahead and thrown it in the tote because it's no good. I've tried to power it up on the bench. I've got no power or no sound coming out of the speakers other than the beep for the radio. Like I showed you in that other video where I put the power to it, there's just no sound. So the amp is powering on. I'm assuming either the amp is bad or one of the other boxes that were attached to the back of this thing were bad, because it had like a low pass filter and some other stuff on it, which is really, really old technology. But I mean, that's what they had back in the day. And I'm sure, again, that was not a cheap setup. So this is where I'm at now. I've got all that stuff pulled apart, but this is going to give me an opportunity. Now that the console's out, really all I need to do is take a little bit more trim off, pull the seats, and then I can get this carpet out and clean the carpet, because, well, that's what color it should be, and that's what color it is, and it's disgusting. So I can pull all this out, clean it really good, put it back in. I need to pull that seat anyway, again, because of that broken seat frame, and I can fix that while it's apart. this wasn't the direction I was hoping this would go. I really wanted to drive this car, and I still might be able to if I can get all this stuff knocked out and get this carpet clean. And I mean, I guess technically I don't need the carpet in the car to drive it, but it would be nice. But I'm going to jump back on this. I'm going to get some of this stuff taken out. I'm going to try to set up the tripod and do a little bit of time lapse as I take the seats out, get all the seat belts and all this trim and stuff out, to give you a little bit of, something to look at other than me just pointing at things in this interior and talking about the things that I'm doing. I thought I had it set up on time lapse, but apparently I didn't, and I took like a 2-second clip. So unfortunately, I missed everything of me getting all of this out, and it was a lot of fun, and I found a few things. The mount for the driver's side floor in the front here is damaged. It's been ripped out, so there's the stud that holds the seat. You can see the one on the inside. I got to repair that floor section so that the seat will bolt back down. There is a dark area here you can see. That's because that's wet, and if I had to guess, it's from where it sat outside for about a month and a half from the time that I brought it home until I got a chance to move it in here. So that tells me something that I kind of figured was already a problem. On these Fox bodies, at the top below the fender where the cowl meets like this A-pillar, there's a lot of seam sealer in this area. And I've seen it in the past where that seam sealer dries out, it crumbles, and it leaves a gap. And then you get what you see here, where you start to get rust forming on the hinge pillar, on this lower section of the A-pillar. And then you've got rust forming on the inside. Well, that's because there's water running down from up there, and the only source is where that fender meets the cowl. So without blowing this thing completely apart, it's not an easy fix. So for now, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to dry out the interior, vacuum this out really, really good, and try to clean it up the best that I can, because I don't really want to blow this thing apart for a full restoration. I want to enjoy it this summer, and I want it to be nice in the interior, so I'm not breathing in a bunch of stuff. One of the other cool things I found, I'm not really sure what this is. I'll have to figure it out later. This was kind of stuck into the seam sealer. You can see it's a bare piece of metal. It's like a spring clip or something. So I don't know what they would have used this for, but I'm sure it held something while this car was being built and just got left in the car. And because it doesn't really look like it's been cut off of something. It's the same color as the car. So I'm assuming it must have been something that was left. And this isn't the first time I've seen this. On my SSP, when I did a teardown on my SSP, I found a bunch of molding clips that were kind of stuck together in some seam sealer in the trunk where they had dropped in there and got forgotten about. And then they painted and seam sealed over them. So I'm going to pull this stuff out, clean the interior. Kind of the same thing I did with the 93 Fober. I'm going to pull all this out, vacuum it real good, wipe it down. I'm not going to put that peel and seal in this car for now. I'm just going to leave this stuff out while I get the carpet clean and try to decide what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to go ahead and leave this stuff out and then put the peel and seal down. It's something I need to think about because, one, I know I need to repair that section there. Two, the floors have got some nasty spots on them. They're going to have to be fixed in the future. I don't want to fight that peel and seal coming up while I'm trying to fix it. So for now, I'm going to stop. I'm going to get the carpet clean. Let me come back here, show you what it looks like. I did see something cool. I believe one of these two sheets, not this one. I'm pretty sure it was this one. I think this was the build sheet for the car. And it's so kind of washed out and stuff that you can't see any of the info on it. But the build sheet would have had like the VIN number and all the options and stuff on it. I didn't see it on the bottom of either one of the seats, which is one of the areas that they can be. So one of the other areas is people say they were laid underneath the carpet on the floor. That's where that was. I don't know if that's the build sheet or not, or if that was on there, but I don't know. Two random pieces of paper stuck to the bottom of the carpet seems weird. The carpet itself, other than being super dirty, looks like it's in good shape. So, I mean, once I get this clean, I'm hoping that these light sections will just be stains and that's not like faded real bad. I'm betting it is just because of the way it looks. But if I can at least get it cleaned up and get some of the nasty stuff out of it, the mold and everything, that's all I really want to do. I found a little bit of rust under the carpet and went ahead and scratched it all down with a steel bristled brush. And then I picked up some rust converter from the store last night. And basically what this stuff does is it neutralizes a lot of the scaly rust that's in here. Now I could use like Pour 15 or something to kind of paint over top of it. A can of Pour 15, like a quart, is now $67 at AutoZone. This was $13, kind of does the same thing. So I'll neutralize all of this scale stuff here, and then there's a little bit over here that I can see. And then from there, I will just go over top of it with like just some black spray paint, because it's going to be under the carpet. Really, nobody's going to see it. I mean, floor needs to be replaced at some point in the future. This will be just fine for now. So I'm going to work on that. I made a decision last night. I'm going to cut that section of the floor out, try to save the factory nut that goes into the stud, and then weld that all back together. So this is going to be a little bit longer episode while I fix the floor over there. And then I found another seat track that I have that's in good shape. So I'm going to pull it off of the other seat. Eventually I'll repair that driver's seat that was over here, but for now, I just want to get this thing where I can drive it. So I'm going to spray this in here, throw a mask and some gloves on, and set a fan up to kind of blow this stuff out, because I really don't know how bad this is, but I can't imagine it's good to breathe. And get some ventilation in here while I spray that. And then I'm working on putting the console back together, because it broke when I took it apart. So I need to do a little bit of plastic welding on the inside of it. And I'll take you over to the bench and show you where it broke and how I'm going to fix it. I've got the factory radio ready to go back in. Took the pocket off of that Pioneer, put it back onto the factory radio. I need to mount the amp up here under the dash. It mounts to the bracket that goes on the back of the console. So I'll do that on the bench before I put it in. Basically just trying to bide my time while the carpet dries, because it's outside on top of my garbage cans. It's a nice windy, sunny day, so it should dry pretty fast, but that insulation that's on the bottom soaks up a lot of water and takes forever. So I'm going to get to work. All right, so I've got that floor on the passenger side drying on the rust converter, and while that does its thing, I'm going to come over here to the driver's side floor and try to fix this front part where the seat attaches. So as I pointed out earlier, this floor has been repaired. This goes up through that hole, and this is a stud that would mount the front of the seat frame to the floor of the car. These studs can be removed. You can put a couple of nuts on them and pull them out. Sometimes they'll come out just where the nut kind of freezes onto the stud. But in this case, this thing has been messed up before, and somebody tried to fix it. I mean, they probably did an okay job. It looks like they had a few welds on this nut, and there was some original metal still left on here. But I'm going to fix this a lot better. I'm going to go outside of their weld and just go ahead and basically cut out a square and then take a measurement on where this stud is supposed to land in comparison to that stud, so that my seat frame will drop down over top of it. You know, there's a hole in the bottom of the seat frame. It's got a little bit like wiggle room to it where it'll drop down over top of that. But I don't want to make it so I have to like go in there and ream that hole out and make it any bigger. So I'm going to take a couple of measurements. I'll draw this out and dig out some sheet metal. I'm probably going to try to find some thicker stuff in my stash. I think I might have a little bit of like 1/8 inch plate, which would be perfect for this. I want this to be thicker. I'm a heavier dude. These were kind of undersized to begin with. So I'm going to work on fixing this now. I've got a couple of racks in the garage that have these totes from Home Depot. These are like the HDX totes, I think is what they're called. You can get a lot of these at like Costco, Walmart, stuff like that. This is one of the bigger ones that they have. I think it's like a 17-gallon. But what I'm getting at, I've got metal drops in here. So inside of this, I keep extra sheet metal from other projects, like those two pieces of metal or what was left over after repairing the floor on the 93 Fobra. And then I've got some other plate steel, some aluminum, some other stuff in there. And I purposely said 1/8 inch earlier because this is the rear floor reinforcement for the SSP, my 87 SSP from Louisville. And I mean, literally, it is a 1/8 piece of plate, and all they did was pop rivet this to the floor. The rear of the seat bolted through these holes, and essentially all it did was just spread that load out on the sheet metal of the floor so that it wouldn't tear in these two contact points where the seat bolts down. 1/8 inch in the front is going to be just plenty. I really don't think I'm going to reinforce the floor on this 87 for now. Maybe in the future I will, or I'm sorry, this 89 that I'm working on. Maybe in the future I'll work on some through the floor, I don't know, subframe connectors or something. But for now, I just want to fix it where the seats will bolt in and won't give me any issues. So I'm going to dig through here. I'm going to find me some 1/8 inch plates and start to make me a little plate to repair that floor. All right, let's see what we've got here. So that's about a 1/16. I'm sure it's thicker gauge. And too thin. Too thin. Well, that's too thin. That's plastic. I include a little bit of everything in here. I've got plastic and metal. I really don't need much, but that's too thin. Aluminum. Yeah, looks like I might have to run to the hardware store. Well, maybe not. 16 gauge. That'll work just fine. We're going to make this work. This 16 gauge will be just plenty thick enough. I mean, I don't know, maybe a little thinner than an 1/8, obviously, but yeah, that'll work. All right, my old chunk of floor is cut out. Of course, it was oriented like that. Now I've got the patch panel in here, so I've got to trim this up a little bit, clean it, make sure that it fits into this hole. And then from here, I'll still need to take that measurement between where this stud is going to mount and where the other stud is. So my plan, I'm going to drill a hole in the top side for the stud to pass through, and then I'm going to weld an M10 nut to the bottom of this. Of course, prime the inside of this box really good, this reinforcement, and then weld that in there. And I'm going to prime it with weld-through primer so that it doesn't rust on the bottom side. I'm not going to be able to get in there and do anything because there's no access. But at least this way, it'll prevent it from rusting in the future. This is a good repair. We're using thicker metal than what's there. This should not break going forward. All right, so what I've got, my little patch panel is made and drops right in there. I need to clean it up just a touch before I burn it in. But I've got that nut on the bottom. I've verified my measurement. It's 10 3/4 of an inch from the center of this stud to the center of that stud over there. So I've verified both sides, 10 3/4 this side, 10 3/4 there, 10 3/4 on the bracket. The measurement from the front of this brace to the middle of the bracket, about 1.5 inches, and I've measured it on both of these studs, both of the studs over on the passenger side. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit, hit the bottom side with weld-through primer, weld that nut to the bottom side of this patch panel, and then burn this thing in with the welder. And from there, should be good to go. I'll put a little bit of paint on the top side after I put some primer on it. And yeah, that'll pretty much be it for this side of the floor. The nut is now welded onto the bottom side. Not my best welds, but it'll hold. I'm going to clean this up a little bit, shoot with a little bit more primer on it. Go ahead and back the stud out and then weld it into the spot right here. It's a little bit of a gap on the back corner, but it's not terrible. It'll be all right. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not like anybody's going to really see this part. It did warp a little bit from those welds, but again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I just need it to hold and be strong. All right, so I'm going to back the stud out and clean this up a little bit and get it ready to weld into here. I'm probably going to try to clean up that the best that I can, really. I mean, it's one of those things that I can get to it right now, but I can spray rust converter down in there, maybe maybe I'll just spray weld through primer into it, because that rust converter, you have to wait 24 hours before you can put anything over top of it, and I don't want to wait. I want to get this thing done. So I got the welder going, and I'm burning this in slow so I don't warp it, but I had a couple of really good welds, and then I forgot that the gas was off on a few, so don't worry about those. They'll get covered up. So far, so good. This thing's going in just like I'd hoped it would. You know, I've got the body hammer over here to kind of help close up these gaps and close this thing up and get it burned in. So I'm going to continue welding. I don't want to have a flash warning or anything like that on this video, so unfortunately no time lapse of me welding this, but I'll come back when I'm done. The patch pedal is welded in now. Overall, I'm really happy with it. There's a couple of pinholes and stuff in here that I need to clean up, and a little bit more grinding to do to make this 100% complete. I'll prime this again with some etching primer, and then from there I'll just lightly dust a little bit of paint onto it. I don't have anything relatively close to this, so I'll have to check the cabinet. I think I got some maroon or something, but basically you just want to get this painted to protect it from rusting in the future. So now that this is done, I'm going to blow the car out. I'm going to vacuum it again, put my carpet back in, and I can start the reassembly process. I went ahead and snipped all of the wires that were going up here to the dash harness, and I've got to basically just loop those two wires up and repair them. Those wires I'm going to pull through the firewall. I don't really think there's anything that I'm going to need them for. I might tape them up just in case I decide to add like an amp or something crazy to this thing and get those up and out of the way. This other white wire, I'm not really sure what it goes to. I'm going to have to chase it up into the dash and see what it goes to. But I'm almost there. I'm almost done with this interior where I can put this thing back together and get it back on the road. I've jumped ahead a few steps. I've got the floor done. Carpet's back in. Now I'm starting to lay the console back in. I've got that premium amp tucked away up under there on the dash and the console. And I've got my wiring run for it. So hopefully that will get me some sound out of these speakers later once I get this all hooked up. Unfortunately, some of the stains and the fading did not come out of the carpet. I also attempted to like plastic weld the console back together. Well, that didn't work either, so no big deal. That console is not really the greatest shape. It'll work for now until I can find another one. I'll probably wind up getting, I think I've got a gray one over there on the shelf, and I can dye it, put it in later. For now, this will work. I might try to get in there and do one more repair on it before I seal everything up, just to make it a little bit more sturdy. So I'm going to continue on putting this thing back together. Hopefully, and cross my fingers, everything works when I hook the battery back up. Now it's starting to look like an interior again. I tried to fix the ashtray door. There's an upright on the back side of it that holds the spring that keeps the door closed. That upright was completely broken off, not in here anywhere. I went ahead and drilled a little hole, tried to remount the spring. It just didn't work. So I'll struggle through that being open until I can get a new piece for the console. I need the sleeves for the seat belts also. They're just sun-baked and destroyed and falling apart. This one just like broke off more pieces as I tightened it into the car. So I'll fix that in the future. One of the last things that I need to do is swap over this good seat frame and slider assembly to the bad seat. So these are really simple. I just zipped out these two 10mm screws that hold them in. There's one on each side in the back, one on each side in the front. And the hardest part about this is moving this slider assembly back, because one side will move while the other will stay in place. So you have to manually reach in here and carefully manipulate the spring and dodge spiders, everything else, to get the slider to move back to the point where you can get to the front bolt. There we go. So here's the front bolts, and we'll just undo those, transfer those over. So something to note, other than the garbage and nastiness, this will matter in just a second when I go to the old seat. You can see on this blue one, this is from a 93. It's open on the bottom here. You can see the foam. You can see all the mechanism. So let me get this track off and then we'll go to the red seat. First thing I'm going to point out, service tag and an F1 part number. This seat track assembly has been replaced once before. The first and the immediate thing you're going to notice, this thing has had fabric put underneath the cushion, the foam, for some reason. And I think it's been recovered because that fabric there matches what's down here on the bottom. And that is not the same fabric as what a normal LX would have. And I'll show you. So this is the passenger seat, and it looks very close. I mean, it's got some ribs in it, but they're not as pronounced. Now, if I flip this passenger seat over, and we'll look underneath, you can see the foam in it. So I know at one point that driver's seat has had some repairs. And looking at this a little closer, somebody actually labeled this with a P for the passenger side of the rack, and then a D for the driver's side. So this is the outside slider rail. So this has definitely been worked on once before. If it bolts in okay, and I still see a little bit of lean to the seat, that is going to require some deep surgery because of the seat back. The bases of these seats, like the frames and stuff, this is just basically like a really thick sheet metal, about that 16 gauge or so that I put on the floor. Well, it works fine for flat surfaces that don't have a lot of pressure put on them. But when you have a seat back and the torque and the shifting and everything else that these cars have, you're placing your upper body against that seat, and that force constantly applies to the back of the seat. Well, this thin sheet metal doesn't hold up. It winds up ripping. I see a couple of repairs that somebody's done. Looks like there's a spot weld there. So I'm hoping that I can just swap out the slider frame assembly and bolt this in, and it will be usable. I'll go ahead and swap this one out. You guys will get a little bit of an action video. I know it's been a lot of cut sequences on this one, but this is taking me, that's good for it. This is taking me quite a bit longer than I thought it would to do all these repairs to this interior. That's Milwaukee for you. Just slap the battery back in and it's good. Alright, let me get this tension spring off. There we go. You want to be careful when you do that. Luckily with the gloves, it just pinches the glove. I don't know what that fly is, but it looks to me like a deer fly, a horse fly or something. We'll get this last bolt. All right. That's fine. All right. So yeah, pretty much nothing on this is going to be usable. Maybe this passenger side isn't too terrible. This driver side, I mean, it's broken right there. Somebody's welded it once before. That's where that foot for the rear attaches. I might be able to save that if I get back in there and clean it up and weld the foot back on. But obviously they knew the floor wasn't correct because somebody wallered out the hole where it mounts to those front studs that I repaired earlier. So I don't know. Maybe I can use some parts off of these. Maybe I'll just scrap them. For now, they're going to lay there on the floor. So we'll go ahead and get this front side attached. Run in a couple of screws. Hold them in place while I grab the impact. Definitely going to have to work on this handle a little bit. It's got some bending to it. There we go. I'm not going to tighten these all the way up. I'm just going to get them snug. because I want to make sure they're square on the base of the seat before I run all the ugga-duggas to it. Without that tension spring hooked up, this thing's a lot more manageable too. It's a little safer. This little slider came over. There we go. Really need 3 hands for this part. There we go. First problem, seat frame's bent. And it's not letting the slider bolt up to it square. That one went in okay. This one's going to fight me. All right, now that that's in there and we're square, I just want to get to these front mounting bolts, and then we'll make sure that the slider assemblies are lined up before we tighten everything down. All right. So the best way to do this is to kind of count the notches that are on the inside of this and level it up. So I'm going to bring this up even, and I've got 2, 4, 6, 8 notches on my locks. Bring that even with the base. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 notches. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, the other 2 are hidden up under that foot. All right, that's even. Something I got to think about when I put it in the car, I need to make sure that this goes down onto the stud and sits even with the floor, because otherwise when I move this back and forth to get the bolts in and the nuts on the studs, it's going to make it uneven again. So I'm going to drop this in the car. We'll go from there. Hopefully this drops in smooth. I'm gonna move that seatbelt out of the way. There we go. The cool thing is, this doesn't have any power options on the seats, so I don't have to worry about reaching under there and plugging the seat in. That's on there. Holes are lined up. Bolt in. Throwing these nuts on so that I can move the seat up and get to the bolts. Cool. Let's get this thing in. If I had the right socket handy. These are 15mm front and rear. For the front ones, usually what I do, because it's kind of hard to get in front of the seat sometimes, you have to put a swivel on there to get around the cushion of the seat and get to the bolt or to the nut on the front. That's not good. Yep, that seat frame's broke. Alright, well, that'll be coming back out again soon. I should have known better. So what I mean by that seat back is moving. It's going to be shaky, sorry. That should not push back as far as it is. And the metal frame that goes on the inside of the seat that makes up the back of the seat is broken. So I'm going to put this on a tripod, sit in the car, and I'll show you what it looks like when I sit in it. All right, well, here we go. So I'm not putting any weight on the back of the seat yet. It's good. My take off. Follow lean. Yeah. It's not bad to drive. It's definitely going to twist my back. And it'll be something I'll eventually have to fix because it's just going to annoy me if I don't. But I'm not going through the floor. I feel pretty solid. I can make this comfortable enough to drive a little bit. Looks like I might need to tighten up the screws in the tilt. That's a little loose. Overall, a lot better than what it was. I mean, that floor was terrible. So that's progress made. I'm gonna continue to bolt on stuff. We'll put my shifter handle on while I'm sitting here. And we'll get the passenger seat in. Put on that kick panel over there, the insulation that goes around it. Put the radio in. And I'm gonna go look for some tapes to see what I can play in this thing that I haven't listened to in probably 25 years. That shifter knob's dirty too. This is what ADD looks like. Clean that shifter knob. Much better. Okay. Now we're good. Yeah, and I still need to wipe down the dash, the door panels, and then get the windows to roll down and figure out why they're not working right, and the locks, and get the tent off of the windows like I started to do 2 weeks ago, and now here we are. The interior's yeah, back in the car, right where I started, with a lot more work to do. Stay tuned. I tested out the radio, got it working. It sounds good. One half of the tape deck's not working. Like one side of the head isn't working right. I tried a couple of different adapters, a couple of different cassettes, tried to clean it. It's just no good. I'd imagine that's probably why that got pulled out now and a aftermarket radio put in. So with that console being tore up, I'll probably do the same. I'll swap out that radio for something a little bit more modern that has Bluetooth capability. I'm not worried about that console, the normal 4 holes that you would drill in it, because it's no good. So onward and forward, I put coolant in the radiator. I immediately heard water running out on the floor. And that is because this is going to be very difficult to see. The lower radiator hose, you can see the lower radiator right there. The hose is disconnected, regardless of whether you can see it or not. I'm not sure why it's disconnected. It's kind of a pain to get to. And it's got these old style clamps on it, like these. They're just not very easy to loosen and tighten. So I've got to get in there, tighten up that, figure out why in the heck it's disconnected, which I can only imagine what awesomeness is going to await me now. I don't see any reason it should be disconnected. Looks like these two heater hoses are connected. Of course, the upper radiator's connected. The heater hoses going over here to the tube is connected. I know the back ones are connected, so who knows? I'll hook that back up. Hopefully take this thing out for a ride. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to get the door panel off to find out why the windows weren't working. Chased all the wires that I could chase without pulling the panel. I even pulled the switch back from the armrest and tested it. It was good there. So I knew my issue was either the wiring here in the door or the motor itself. Looks like the motors are locked up. So on these Ford motors, you can pull these things apart. Let me zoom in here. You can take these things apart. There are crush bushings inside of here. You can see what's left of them inside. And basically what happens is if something was to get stuck in the window while it was going up, these would crush before it would actually crush your hand. Normally what happens is these things go bad. You can hear the motor running because you can see it's like a triangle. A little bushing fits in these circular spots. And you can hear the motor running and it works. In this case, this motor is locked up. I hooked it up to power with all this junk out of here. There's a worm gear inside of there, and that worm gear is not turning. So this thing is shot. Unfortunately, I was hoping if I tapped on it enough, if I cleaned it, I could get it up and running again and make these windows work, and that's not the case. So now I'm going to have to order the window motor, probably from like Rock Auto or something, so I can get it here and at least get the windows working again. The locks, I can only imagine what that is. Inside of his door, you can see over here, there's a actuator right here at the bottom. They're pretty common failure points on these doors where the lock actuator freezes. I actually had one lock me out of the vehicle one time. So while I have this panel off, I'm going to go ahead and order the lock actuator. We'll get the window motor. I'm going to put the speaker back in because even though this thing had premium sound, somebody hacked off the end of the wiring here. I don't know what happened to the speaker, but I've got the speakers. I'll put them back in, repair the wiring, and plug that back up too. Yeah, another case of while I'm in here, I'm going to spend another $100 trying to get this door back into shape. So at least, you know, when it's all said and done, I know a lot of the stuff is going to work again. I'm not waiting anymore. I've rolled the window down manually. I've got that window motor out. I'm not going to even try to wait for the window motor to come back into stock. I've got it topped off with a few ounces of coolant and mostly water. I really expect there to be a leak somewhere. I'm going to drive it. All right, well, we got good oil pressure. We're somehow charging by some miracle. Let's see if we can make this go down my road here. Speedometer works, that's a plus. splashing through some puddles is going to make it interesting to find any leaks we might have. I wonder if this will do a burnout. Well, the brakes suck. Yes, it does a burnout. All right, I've got the car pulled back in the garage, and I learned a few things while I was doing that little test drive up and down my road. The first thing I learned, the upper radiator hose was hot, the lower hose was hot, the radiator was hot, but my coolant hoses going to the heater core back here were cool. And after I shut the car off, turned the key off, the radiator cap over there started to steam. So I need a radiator cap. That's kind of the first thing. Second thing, as I mentioned in that other clip where I did the burnout, the brakes suck. It barely stops the car. So I'm going to put this up in there, go through and bleed all the brakes off camera. It's kind of boring. That fluid is super nasty, super dark. It needs to be bled all the way out, put new fluid in just to make sure it's safe. The third thing I learned was that there was no power steering fluid. I should have checked that before I moved out of the garage. It felt okay while I was backing it out, but once I got out there on the road, I had no power steering at all. So right now I've got it topped off with fluid. Moved the wheel back and forth several times trying to get the fluid worked in there and bleed out any air. And that seems to have worked for now. I'm sure there's a leak somewhere. This tie rod over here looked very, very wet. The inner tie rod where it meets the rack. So I imagine that rack's probably leaking. That's a tomorrow problem, not a today problem. The other thing I should probably address, and I might do this off camera, I might make a little clip out of it, but the gaping hole right here where the strut tower meets the rail, I need to do something about that. What I'll probably do is pop off the coil and the bracket, just do some sort of support right here with some angle iron or something just to make that a little bit more safe than what it is. We'll go from like the corner of the strut tower down here to the rail, just burn that in with some angle iron and call that good. Then after that, I'll just fix things that pop up when they break. I want to get this car on the road. I want to enjoy it this summer. And so far, I'm pretty proud of what I've done, and I'm pretty happy with what I've done. You know, I've put this thing back on the road after it sat for all those years. And yeah, it's going to have some problems. Things are going to pop up, but it's still going to be a fun little car. So that's going to be it for this video. And I'm really, really appreciative of all the support that everybody has shown me. The likes, the subscribes, the comments, all that stuff really means a lot. We don't need to look at that. That's not important. We'll address that in another video. This one's already too long. So thanks for watching, and remember to stay gloved up.